Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, there is a big piece of news that we want to make sure we covered first, which is a security vulnerability around the Erlang OTP beam. And this is specifically around the SSH daemon, or a little service that you can run actually in OTP. I didn't actually know you could run an SSH server in Erlang Beam, but you can. And so what it was is there was a problem with how the protocol was implemented in the Erlang side. What this is it's actually quite a big deal, but then we want to talk about what does this actually mean for our Elixir apps, for Phoenix, for, who does this impact and what do we need to do? So what it is it's unauthenticated remote code execution. So that is as bad as it gets. That is, in terms of the vulnerability score, it's like 10 out of 10. That you can have someone from anywhere in the world that's not authenticated be able to execute code on your device. That's bad. So we have a link to the Erlang OTP security advisory. Their summary is, a serious vulnerability has been identified in the Erlang OTP SSH server that may allow an attacker to perform unauthenticated remote code execution by exploiting a flaw in SSH protocol message handling. A malicious actor could gain unauthorized access to affected systems and execute arbitrary commands without valid credentials. The severity is 10 out of 10, and that is literally the worst it gets.
Yeah.
So the question really is okay, am I in danger? What do I need to do? So am I affected? To help give some context to this, Michael Lubis at Paraxial wrote up a blog post about it. Breaking it out into, okay, if you have an Elixir Phoenix application and it's deployed on the open internet, are you vulnerable? And the answer is most likely no. The default configuration for Phoenix does not expose the Erlang SSH daemon to the public internet. It is technically possible you are vulnerable if your application does expose Erlang's SSH daemon. Like if you're using the Erlang SFTP clients, they do this. That's not something I've ever actually seen set up on a project. We have a link to the Paraxial blog post on this too, where you can check it out. You think about it, and if your Elixir application is hosted on AWS, GCP, Gig Elixir, Fly, or really any hosting provider, most platform as a service hosting providers do not open those ports. It's just the TLS and port 80 possibly. So you would have to explicitly make that open.
Yeah.
So by default, no, you're not vulnerable.
So that's like my perspective, right? Like I'm generally a web developer first and Phoenix applications and all, but then I thought about what about nerves? That's like the primary way, SSHing into your nerves device to manage it, right? I don't know the technical details. Maybe it doesn't do this, but wouldn't SSH be the mechanism for sending updates to your nerves devices? So you have to have these ports kind of open. And I realize you can change the port numbers, to kind of have security by obscurity. That's the right word. But still, it's the same thing. They just scan all the ports, not just port 22, and they can find it. So anyway, nerves, some nerve systems may be impacted. And so if you are running nerves systems, you should probably go look for the updated nerves version release and push that out there. And we've got a post out to Elixir forum that has a lot more details on this. And so again, that's, some nerve systems that are internet exposed, first of all, or at least on a public network, even if it's not internet exposed, but you've got other people that can get on that public network and then find that device, that would be vulnerable at that point. Less likely because you're not just people sitting at home can't go into your nerves devices. But anyway, this is something to think about. So if you've got nerves devices out there, consider that. On the plus side, one of the great points of nerves is Nerves Hub. And Nerves Hub is the ability is the SaaS platform, right? Not SaaS isn't something that you have to pay for necessarily. It's just something that you can host that can push updates remotely to your devices. And so, yes, there might be a vulnerability right now, but like I said, there is a system update out there, so you should be able to reburn all of your firmware with the latest Nerve software, and then push that updated firmware out to your devices, and then you're not vulnerable anymore. So I highly recommend any Nerves administrators out there to go to go fix some things up.
Yeah. So just to be clear, there is an updated Nerve system available as a patch release to address this specific issue. So yeah, if you are running Nerves, make sure to go get your latest release and get that deployed as soon as you can. Also on the Paraxial blog was how to check your exposure. There's some instructions there on how you can actually use Nmap on your devices within your networks and just see like what is being exposed here, what is a risk. And also he has a link to Shodan. If you've never heard of Shodan, it's like Google for the internet devices. It just goes and searches all IP ranges and sees what answers here. And then they make that accessible so you can just search Shodan. It's almost like I can only really think of nefarious uses for this, but it's there. And so you can just search Shodan, search the query of Erlang and SSH. And right now I'm seeing a total of 157 results. Like that's not like thousands or millions or anything like that. But it is showing these are devices, because when a device answers, a lot of times it answers with its version. So you're able to see if it is running a currently vulnerable version. And now you have the IP address and you can just plink, right? I own it. Get on that as soon as you can. Well, now is the perfect time to talk about today's sponsor, which is Paraxial.io. Every day, hackers search the internet for vulnerable applications aiming to steal sensitive data, commit fraud, and spitefully ruin the weekend of a hardworking developer. Paraxial is the first and only security platform with full Elixir support that stops these attacks. Developers love the Elixir native protection. Management loves Paraxial's metrics and details of security accomplishments of engineering, which are also required for SOC 2, ISO, and HIPAA compliance. Sign up for a free trial of Paraxial today and mention Thinking Elixir when you schedule a demo for a limited time offer. Check it out today at Paraxial.io.
All right, next up, some Oban news. So OpenPro 1.16, the last we talked about, I think it was the release candidate that was out there. But Oban has published a new article out there that talks about the new Cascade Mode and how it can be used to generate a collection of children's stories. Right? It's a use case. It's showing you how to use it.
Yep.
So we got some links to the posts. It's on Oban.pro, so you'll find it there. It definitely talks about OpenPro's 1.6 feature set and their new cascading workflows feature. It talks about how they use the feature to create a workflow that basically creates children's stories using AI for the story, the artwork, and a markdown file about it all. It's a pretty fun and interesting way of like just thinking about it. Yeah, it really highlights the strength of OpenPro workflows. And so here's a quote from the article. It says, think of workflows as a pipe operator for directed, distributed, persistent, map-reduce functions. And yeah, that's a perfect way of describing what this can do for you. And so just to describe it just a tiny bit more, like here's what the code kind of looks like, right? Like you start a new workflow, you put some context into that workflow, like for example, a topic or a count or something, and then you add cascade. That's the new function here, workflow.add cascade. And you have names for each of those phases, right? Authors, stories, images, title, cover, and then finally, print. And for all of these parts of the workflow, they have dependencies on the other, like maybe earlier parts of the workflow. For example, you can't generate images without at least some of the stories or the authors in there. And you can't really, maybe you think about the title after you've written the story. So you need the title and the cover after the story's there. So it's a way to essentially automate, kind of like this entry point and then this fan out and waiting on dependencies to be done. And then coming back in, and then finally the last step would be to print the thing. In this case, it's not gonna physically print it, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, what I liked about the example also is just making the point how with AI, lots of times the services that you're using, reliability is not 100% countable, that you can depend on it, right? And that's whenever you talk about productionizing a system with AI, that's something you have to take into account, that this service might go down, or they might get overloaded and say back off, or they might, just whatever. And so that's part of what the workflow is showing, is that, hey, these important pieces of these steps, those are retriable, and we'll come back to those as part of the Oban process. So It was just neat. I think it was a great way of highlighting how you can have that whole flow of this has to happen first, then this happens, and then you can unlock this multiple sets that can happen simultaneously, and some of them may be failing and having to be retried, but bringing it all back together at the end, I think it's a great example.
Right. And Oban has tools to allow you to kind of visualize what you've made. Like what mess did I just create here? You can export it into Mermaid, and it'll give you a nice little flow chart of the overall workflow. And I just want to highlight this part too, is that first function in there is like add context, right? And so that context, it's map reduce, right? So that context is kind of like this accumulator that goes through the whole and travels through the whole workflows. And so those bits of information can be picked up in a later step to inform how it should work, right? So that's how these are all kind of interconnected. Another shining example of why OpenPro is definitely worth it. So if you need something like this, which undoubtedly, I think most businesses need something like this at some point, right? I guarantee you it's going to cost you less to pay for OpenPro than it would be for you to have even one developer on this for 2 weeks, right? So definitely worth it. And I know it's AI art, which can be hit or miss, but and I'm assuming this is AI art in the blog post, but the blog post actually has some really good looking stuff in there. So it's visual candy too. Just you don't even have to read it. Just look at the pictures and you'll be delighted.
And next up, José Valim has been teasing a new logo, and all he's saying about it is soon. So at the time of this recording, nothing more has been shared yet. So it could be any day now. He shared this little announcement of the logo plus soon twice now. So maybe it's coming very soon, and it'll already be out by the time you hear this. But we'll tell you what we do know now. There is a GitHub organization that was found that is using this logo. It is called TidalWave-AI. And there's only one project that's currently public in that organization, and it is called MCP Proxy Elixir. If you remember, we've talked about MCP servers, which is Model Context Protocol, being put out first by Anthropic and adopted by OpenAI. It's kind of becoming the thing that people are all moving to. And really all it is a protocol as a way of standardized definition for saying, here is a set of services that I want to expose to an LLM. And so I can expose things as tools, and then also they can be a client of another server to use its tools. So this project is an Elixir MCP server for standard I/O. So that right there is an interesting idea, right? Like that you can use Unix pipes and standard I/O to pass data between applications running on the same computer, and as that a way of talking to your MCP server, because that is one of the ways you can host an MCP server. It could be HTTP requests, or it can be standard I/O is one of them, right? So that's the only thing we really know for sure. But we also know that Chris McCord has been teasing some things with AI development and Phoenix applications. We've got a link to the latest one that he'd shared. And in this example, it's a little video showing how he was having an AI agent in a Phoenix application write its own JavaScript in the Phoenix application of the tools that it could be using. And he's just talking about how that was really kind of really heady, like this is kind of a strange idea that the agent is writing its own tools. And it worked. So maybe that's related? I don't know. But the one thing that to also be aware of is there was the GitHub organization links to a new website called tidewave.ai, but currently that doesn't load to anything, right? So we know there's something. It's called Tidewave, and it's AI, but that's really all we know for sure, and that there's MCP Elixir servers, which is in itself really cool.
Yeah. Maybe the sleuthers have sleuthed up enough information to figure out what this is going to be, and maybe they've spoiled it. But but this is definitely pretty exciting.
Yes.
And speaking of teases out there, maybe this is related, maybe it's not, who knows, but Zach Daniels also teasing some Ash news to be announced at ElixirConf EU. He hasn't, as far as I know, there's no sleuthing on what they've what this is about yet. But just judging by the icon that they've got, in the teaser in the latest weekly Ash Weekly issue 13, it definitely looks like AI related as well. So there's just a lot of AI things going on right now. It may Zach Daniels' thing may have nothing to do with tidal wave, but there's definitely stuff being teased. This must be conference-driven development. We must be coming up to conferences soon, I think.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it is going to be hard to remember this, but it is tide wave.
Oh, tide wave.
Yes, tide wave.
Oh, well,
I know. You look at it and you think, and you hear it, and you hear it spoken. It's like tidal wave is what you think, but like no, it's tide wave.
Tide wave. Oh
yes.
Man, I think they should rename it to tidal wave now.
Well, that might be taken. I don't know. and if I misspoke at any time when I was mentioning it, I apologize. I didn't catch it, but so it's tide wave.
Tide wave.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Oof. All right. Well, moving on from that. So I came across some interesting things on the internet, as we all do sometimes. Some of it funny, some of it not. A lot of it sad. This one was pretty cool. This is about Elixir. Well, let me back up a little bit. So Sequin has a Reddit post out there that explains why they built something called Mini Elixir. Okay, I was like, well, that's intriguing. What's Mini Elixir? And I looked into it. They have another blog post that properly wraps up this whole thing too. So it's both a Reddit post and a blog post on the Sequin site. But Sequin, they're an Elixir company out there that deals with transforming a lot of data streams out there, right? And so one of their challenges was they need the ability for users to provide logical transformers to them. So that way when Sequin's workflows are, taking data from one place and putting it in another place, a transformer can be put into that workflow to do the transform, right? Well, if it's user input, you're going to have problems. So the challenge was, how do you get a sandboxed Elixir, transformer, or any kind of transformer? It doesn't have to be Elixir. And so they started experimenting. And so there is a blog post that compares a lot of these Lambda-like functions out there, these Lambda solutions out there, right? How can I get an isolated little environment of some executable, small piece of code? That's pretty much what we think of Lambdas today, right? You throw up some JavaScript on some cloud server somewhere and then have it take some input and give you an output, and you get charged by the execution, I guess, right? All right, so there's a lot of those kinds of solutions out there, and they explore a lot of those solutions. And what they came up with, it was interesting. One of the interesting parts of their post was the comparison of all these solutions and their homegrown kind of limited Elixir AST kind of evaluation. So they benchmarked it all, and they have like this chart of like what the complexity is, what's the infrastructure you need for hosting this kind of a thing. They're already an Elixir shop, so they have Elixir. Their app is already out there and evaluates Elixir in runtime anyway. And so their benchmarks came up with 10 microseconds to evaluate their user supplied Elixir code that has been sandboxed in a way that cannot really, reach outside of its own little scope, right? 10 microseconds, that's incredibly small. That's the fastest, for what it's worth. That's the fastest execution time in their chart that they come up with. Compared to probably the most common solution out there is the typical cloud Lambda function to being 10 milliseconds. I don't know if that includes the cold startup or not, but 10 milliseconds, that's pretty fast too. But 10 microseconds compared to 10 milliseconds, when you throw percentages at that, 10 microseconds is a lot of percentages faster than 10 milliseconds. It's not quite apples to apples, obviously, right? You got a lot more going on with other Lambda functions. Just to explain what they compare, it's not just Lambda functions out there. They also compared like Docker and Firecracker instances. They compared WASM functions. They compared Dino. Dino's that JavaScript runtime. Right. They have a solution for that. They compared another language called Starlark, which is kind of built for this kind of thing, maybe. And then they also compared Lua via Luerl, right? So it's still kind of native Erlang VM stuff, but it's the Lua language. Lua was also very fast, by the way. Check out the chart to find out more info. And then they compared, obviously, their Mini Elixir, which is the AST. All right, so that's pretty much it. It's a very interesting post. You should read up on it. Can't talk about Mini Elixir, which is not a published package or anything. This is just like a code sample of what they did. So this is not something that you can just pull into your code base. This is not a published package like on Hex. You'd have to go look at the repo and rip out the pieces you want. But if you're looking for a published package, Mini Elixir was inspired a lot by a project called Dune. Dune is a published package and it is out there, so you can go check that out. It's Mini Elixir is highly inspired by Dune, just a little bit differently approached. And by the way, Dune is created by one of the Phoenix maintainers, so good heritage, right? All right, last thing, I mentioned Starlark. If you haven't heard of Starlark, here's a quick definition. It's a language intended for the use as a configuration language, and it was designed for the Bazel build system. All right, so that's what Starlark is. It's a very small language, and it's built for like defining infrastructure, pretty much, build systems. So not quite what you're probably wanting, for this scenario. But interesting that they tried that out. So a purpose-built kind of language for this sandbox environment. Even that was slower than Mini Elixir. Anyway, found that highly fascinating. We got a couple of great links out to explore Dune, Mini Elixir, and then both the blog posts put out by Sequin. Sequin continues to be a pretty captivating Elixir company. They do a lot of cool stuff so far.
And next up, Semaphore, that's Semaphore CI. They have open sourced their CI/CD platform under the Apache 2.0 license in a new GitHub repository. So apparently the move to open source was announced at the end of February in 2025 at Semaphore Summit. That's really remarkable, one, that they're making this available open source. But what is so cool is that it is an Elixir and Phoenix application. I didn't know Semaphore was a Phoenix application. So that's really neat. So we've got a link to the GitHub project, a Semaphore.io website, and the documentation where you can get started with it. So when you look at the GitHub project, it's 77% Elixir. There's some other languages like some TypeScript and Golang and other things in there that are in smaller percentages. This was announced by Marko Anastasov, who is a co-founder of Semaphore CI. And he said, "This is the biggest news we've released since launching Semaphore 2.0 in 2018. So what have they actually done here? They have open sourced what they're calling their community edition, and the company continues to offer an enterprise edition. So you can still run that on-prem, but it does require a commercial license. And then they also still offer Semaphore Cloud as a hosted solution in case, you don't want to run your own thing or you're wanting enterprise solution stuff that you don't want to maintain. I know for myself, I've used GitLab for CI/CD in the past for self-hosted stuff that we needed to be able to have for compliance reasons, to be able to say, no one has access to this and all these. Yeah, it was easier with GitLab. And this is just an interesting option to say, oh, well, I want to run Semaphore and I can do that in-house. And they have documentation on how you can do that on Kubernetes or different ways of running it. But really, the coolest part is that this is an Elixir application. So if you want to start poking around just to see how does something like this work, that would be a great one to just be able to poke around and learn from too.
Yeah, that's got to be a big code base. We've typically thought of Nerves Hub being a good example of cross domain cutting Elixir code, right? Mm-hmm. It's dealing with devices and then Phoenix stuff as well. Semaphore is going to be similar in that regard, right? It's cross cutting into infrastructure at this point, right? But then also, so CI things as well. And then of course it's a big Elixir app. So it could be a really interesting thing to see how they accomplished, how they solved common problems in Elixir.
Anyway, very exciting news. It's a general tool that you could use because you're a software developer and you want to be able to have CI/CD. So here's another option that it's open source. And then it's Elixir and Phoenix.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
All right, next up, there's a SQL parser and sigil. It's simply called SQL. Good luck Googling that one, I guess. It's called SQL, and it's been a work in progress, right? Alpha stage, I guess, at this point. So we got a link to it. It's Elixir DB Visor /SQL. But the news is that they've published some impressive benchmarks recently. So we got a link out to the Google group post that talks about this. Here's a quote from it. It says, SQL, the package here, parser, package here, is between 400 to 650 times faster than Ecto to generate SQL. That's pretty darn impressive. that's pretty impressive. Mind you, it's not apples to apples. Ecto is obviously doing a lot more. You have Ecto schemas in there that do a lot of like typecasting and things like that. But when it comes to interpolating values and translating to SQL, that's really impressive. And it's really fast. The idea, here to just kind of like rip from the README a little bit, just so you know how to use it. It's based on that SQL sigil, right? So you're basically writing raw SQL in this sigil, and it will parse it for you and interpolate values for you as well. So in this like string-like thing, you could just put your, where email equals and then interpolate the value of email in there. And it will make sure that it is parameterized, correctly and sent over the wire, I presume, via your app.repo. So it's pretty interesting. And I presume it would handle basic scalar types, normally, but where it won't connect to Ecto at this very moment, at least, is, your schema. So if your schema says that this field is this other type here, that's not a standard type, then that's where it may not work out right now. But interesting to think about. I think there could be a interesting future for SQL. I've always loved a SQL sigil anyway, at least for compile time checks. Could be pretty interesting to write for. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm slowly coming around to like a decision here about like a normative practice for Ecto migrations. Like stop using Ecto for migration, not Ecto. Like the migrator and the run are totally fine, but stop using like normal code, application code in Ecto migrations. For example, you need to just update some field, across the table. Don't use Ecto queries for that. You get into trouble 9 times out of 10, or some weird thing's going to happen later in a year after you do that migration, right? It's always way after. If someone's starting up from scratch, for example, and running migrations, and all of a sudden they're trying to run this stuff that doesn't exist anymore. And so instead, I've been finding myself just writing a lot of executes. Mm-hmm. And executes is just Ecto queries way of, Ecto migrations, a way of just running raw SQL in there. And so I've just been writing a lot of raw SQL in my migrations like this. And so the Sigil SQL library here could be a really interesting and more safer, way for me to do that. So something I've been thinking about. I'm not ready to commit to that quite yet, but interesting. Yeah, so very interesting. So anyway, the SQL sigil is between 650 times faster than Ecto is to generate SQL. That's the news item today. Worth exploring. Keep that in your notebook for coming back to. This is going to be a good project, I think.
It's very interesting. And next up, BeaconCMS is reducing development due to DockYard cuts. So what that is DockYard had started this project called BeaconCMS, which was a content management system that was all written with Phoenix and LiveView. It's been demoed at different conferences and things where showing how interactive it was. Like you can edit these web content elements and just having them immediately updated. The idea was to say, hey, we want to provide something that has WordPress-like functionality in that I don't have to be a programmer to be able to work on this website and my marketing website, just business stuff. I want WordPress-like functionality, but not using WordPress because it has its own set of issues, right? Running WordPress. Unfortunately, Brian Cardarella shared on Blue Sky that he said it's going to be tough as we haven't had any paying clients for it, talking about BeaconCMS. The investment is very, very high, and without any movement on client inquiries, it's not making any financial sense. Because of that, they're having to pull off some of the people they had dedicated to working on the project. So they're being pulled off to other things. So BeaconCMS still there, still open source, but DockYard is not being able to push that as much as they have been. So just heads up, I'm not sure what that means for the future of the project. If it's in a point where people want to community level pick it up and run with it, I don't know. But just wanted to pass that along.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially right now. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's company run, company sponsored right now by DockYard, which we are, obviously the whole community would be very grateful for. But that said, BeaconCMS is an incredibly important project, I think, for the future adoption of like general CMS systems out there, which WordPress has a huge market share out there.
Yes.
And it's steadily decreasing. No thanks to all that drama. We won't go into that, but BeaconCMS is also a very, very interesting approach to CMS systems with a compiled system like Elixir that also recompiles in runtime efficiently. What you see is what you get, kind of editing, in there. It's leveraging all the superpowers of Phoenix Live View. It is a wonderfully architected, solution so far. I hope it doesn't get left on the branch and die off. I hope someone picks it and runs with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's everything we have for Elixir specific news. There was one other thing I heard and I wanted to pass along because this impacts a lot of us just who are web developers. And this was big, interesting news about how authentication is changing. And this is happening at the W3C level with all three big major browser makers. This is interesting. I'm going to pass along a lot of the other resources. There's a podcast I listen to. I've been listening to it for like over a decade, and it's called Security Now. So I've got a link to that episode plus the show notes. And the show notes it's a PDF where they go into deeper discussion about this. So what it's called is device-bound session credentials. So it's a 3-hour-ish long podcast. And
Oof.
Yeah. And
I guess our listeners should be thankful that we don't do that.
Yes. In the show notes, I've got links to where it starts. Like the discussion about this topic is 2 hours and 23 minutes in, and it runs for 50 minutes where they talk about this. So I'm just summarizing, right? There's a lot to this. So I'm just going to summarize what this is just to put it on people's radar to make sure we're aware of it so we can start planning for it and looking forward to this. So what this is a change to how session cookies will work. So again, it's a W3C initiative. So this is all major browsers are working on this and implementing this, and it's a browser side thing, but it will require some minor changes to the web application frameworks to work for it. So that means Phoenix will have to have some changes to be able to fully support this. But most of the work is being done by the browsers. And so what they're trying to do is fix security issues for everyone across the board and roll it out slowly and let frameworks and websites and servers adjust and adapt over time. So it's not like it's going to break anything. It's just going to be upgrading.
So let me see if I can understand this so far. So DBSC, I'll just call it that, right? The device-bound session credentials, right? So today, web applications have a typical authentication strategy by sessionizing credentials. And that session is stored in a cookie that the browser kind of takes around and validates and makes sure that it only is sent appropriately, right? When you're on that domain, send that one, cookie that's there. It's inside of that cookie is going to be just information that the server side, application can then, pick up, decrypt, validate that it's still good, and then trust that, right? And so the trust there, a typical web application will put in like the current user ID in that session. So that's how they know who that user is. And then they may stuff more stuff in there. But that's a traditional session cookie here, right? Yep. And those are typically set by, if you think about the methodology of logging in, you can think of like this as a SSO. SSO is where you kind of bounce around between a couple of websites that know who you are, but eventually you get this trusted token, and so you set your session cookie. Or a magic link, which is, again, just another mechanism for sending an email. And if you have that email, then you go to this this specific link that is consumable only once. You get that special token, and it sessionizes your you at that point. So that's SSO, magic link, or standard email and password login. But the end result is all the same. You get a session cookie at the end of that little flow. But there's more stuff coming up, and I guess that's what DBSC is about replacing that session cookie with something that is more secure. But I'm a little confused. How does this tie into things like, okay, there's the hardware level of things, but then there's also like upcoming things that are not widely adopted yet, like like passkeys or
Right.
WebAuthn or something like that. Is that passkeys and WebAuthn, is that leading towards DBSC here? What's the thing? What's the deal?
It's not actually. It's separate and not fully related to those. First, we need to understand, why is DBSC needed? David did an awesome job laying out how cookies are set and what they're actually holding.
Mm-hmm.
So cookies are a 31-year-old technology.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy. Think about how long it's been.
Yeah.
It was actually invented in 1994 by a Netscape engineer. And then through the years, they added the secure flag so that the cookies will only be transferred over HTTPS connections, so they're not being passed in the clear.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the reason they're needed is because cookie theft is a major cause of account hijacking. So the idea is, if I can get your cookie, then I'm logged in effectively as you on some other computer because I was able to steal that cookie. So that's really the problem we're trying to solve. And in that time of 31 years, there's been a lot of improvements to cryptographic options that are now available. So there's new options that we can use. So what this does, the core concept here, is that it uses device-bound cryptographic keys that cannot be exported from the user's device. So you think like an iPhone or a Windows machine, they have a TPM, which is a hardware element that's in the hardware that stores a cryptographic secret in the hardware that never comes out. So the other pieces of the hardware and the software can talk to this TPM, and a TPM is a trusted platform module. That's what that means. Mm-hmm. What can happen is you can say, I want to have this piece of data signed by the secret that is in the TPM, and the little hardware module will do that signature for you, but it never exposes what that secret is. And that secret is tied to that device. So you start realizing, okay, so now we have this secret that is secure. There's been no way that they've discovered about how to actually, steal that secret. Like software, even if you had malware running on the computer, it could not steal that secret. It's a physical hardware thing. You'd have to crack it open and be able to try and figure out what was in the actual hardware.
Something's got to get to it though, right? Like you do have to provide some sort of authentication at the OS level, I guess, to be able to access the TPM functions, to give you the thing. So, but I guess that's the point, is that it's OS level at that point, right? That's where like the MacBook is going to ask for your little fingerprint, or your iPhone's going to ask for, the face scan. Like that's the authentication method at that point.
Yeah. So you could be tying the OS could say, we're going to tie a fingerprint or a face scan to be able to access these functions, being able to sign things with the TPM. So yeah, you still have that separate level of authorization, like that you need to be authorized to use this. But yeah. So anyway, the whole core concept is you're talking about TPMs, these trusted platform modules. And so then what happens is with session registration, browsers can create cryptographic keys at sign-in, and then the cookie has refreshing ability now, where the browser automatically proves device possession periodically. And so what you're doing is that sessions are cryptographically tied to physical hardware. You get your normal cookie session set up, and what's beautiful about this solution is it doesn't break anything that currently works, right? It still all works the same. It's just that this session, the length of that session is going to be much shorter, or can be much shorter. Because right now, a very common approach in mobile applications and front-end spas is that application, that front-end spa or the mobile app, will get a long-lived token that is used for signing short-lived sessions. Mm-hmm. So that if the short-lived session is stolen and the cookie hijack, it's gonna time out in expire in 15 minutes or something like that. Because you'll notice, when you're using your mobile apps and stuff, you sign in and you never sign in again. You may re-authenticate to do a sensitive action, but you're not signing in and proving who you are on the mobile device in that application over and over. So what this does is it's like that. You're having this long-lived secret, which lives in the TPM, and the website then will now say, hey, it's been a little while. I need you to re-authenticate your session for me. Prove that you're still the same device. And then so there can be this little handshake that goes on where the TPM is used to re-sign the secret and refresh another short-lived cookie for the application. People have been solving this on their own, writing their own code to do this. But this is saying, this is so important. We're just going to make this the way it works, and using the hardware to hold that session.
That's interesting.
The hardware does not hold the session. I shouldn't say it like that, but the hardware is the key to proving that you control that device, and it's signing the session and renewing that session. So what it actually requires from the web frameworks is that they have to have some other endpoints for that extra browser conversation to happen. So the browser will be able to hit an endpoint on the website to redo that short-term negotiation for updating the session. That's pretty much all it will be, right? It's like my normal web application code won't change. It'll still just be sessions. I won't have to do anything, change the way I code anything. A little bit of change has to happen at the framework to be able to answer that browser query and that session going back and forth. But it's going to change how cookies work at a fundamental level. So I've got links to some other resources where you can check it out and get a little bit more information. This is just starting to roll out. This was just recently added to Chrome version 135 and Firefox 137. So this is starting to happen, and not all hardware has a TPM. So it's not going to be everywhere all at once, but it's coming. And it's just something that we want to be aware of, because ideally we want to protect our users as developers of our applications. And so this will be another way to prevent cookie hijacking and locking sessions to a specific device. It's just really cool.
Yeah, I'm going to have to keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about it again, especially as updates are made with really popular frameworks like Phoenix, the one we care about.
Yeah. I'll have to hit up Owen over there at he's got the WebAuthn live view example too, so I'll just see what he thinks.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.